Hey Donna, how are we doing? Looks like we need some planning board members, but doing okay on the technical side.
We are. I just need more planning board members.
Great.
I think I'm just waiting on Ellie. Give her another minute.
Sounds great. We'll give her one more minute and we'll get going.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Heimel with CAPS. Just doing a quick sound check. Make sure you can all, okay, thanks.
And I see that Ellie ended up as an attendee. I've just promoted her, so we should see her soon.
Excellent. Looks
Okay.
like we've got everybody. So I'll call this November 16th, 2021 planning board meeting to order. Donna, would you please do a roll call?
Thank you. Sean McCoy, Neva Hassanen, and Jim Bashan could not be here tonight. Josh Schrader.
Present.
Josh Schrader is present. Andy Mefford.
Here.
Andy Mefford's present. Dave Loomis.
Here.
Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Here.
Micah Sewell is present. Toon Pham.
Here.
Toon Pham is present. Ellie Costello.
Present.
Ellie Costello is present. Shane Morrissey.
Present.
Shane Morrissey is present. Mr. Chair, I have 6 regular members and 1 alternate present. Would you like to appoint Ellie as a regular voting member tonight?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the November 2nd meeting 2 weeks ago. If anybody has any comments, additions, or anything like that to those minutes, let us know. And if not, we'll take a motion.
So
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, got Ellie moving,
I'll second.
seconded by Tung. I think we just do a voice vote. All in favor of approval of the minutes from November 2nd, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to public comment. This is the next item on our agenda. Donna, if you wouldn't mind putting the call instructions on the screen, it'd be great. Public comment period is for items that are not on the agenda tonight. If there's anything that public wants to bring to the planning board's attention that's not related to an item on the agenda tonight, feel free to call in. And let me get some instructions.
Here we go. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was gonna.
Took me a little while to find it.
So the call-in instructions are on your screen. There's some call-in numbers for both cell phone and landline users. There's also a webinar ID and passwords. Please remember that you need to use *9 to raise your hand and be recognized for public comment. *6 to mute. After you've said your name, your full name, you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So just give it. Oh, and please remember to mute any devices you have playing in the background so that we don't get feedback or delay. So the with that, I'll just go silent for a couple of minutes and see if anybody calls in. Not seeing anybody. Donna, you seeing anything on your side?
I do not.
Okay. With that, we will close the public comment period and move on to our next agenda item, which is staff announcements. I do not believe we have any staff announcements this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't have anything at this for this meeting. Next meeting, I'll do my update.
Great, thanks, Bailey. Moving right along, we'll move into public hearings. Let's see here. So our first public hearing is going to be presented by Matt Hemmel. Sorry, Matt.
That's right, Heimel. You got it right.
The PDF version online looks like 2 L's in there. Apologize about that. Matt Hemmel, Missoula County Community and Planning Services, CAPS, and it's a request to revoke the Canyons Gate Ole's planned variation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right, good evening, everybody. Matt Hamill here with Missoula County Community Planning Services. I will share my screen. I have a brief PowerPoint to show today. That should do it.
Yep, we got
Can
you.
you see this? Okay. So yeah, this is a request to revoke the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation. Tonight is the first public hearing on this item. We followed up with the Board of County Commissioners on December 9th. The applicant is Castle Rock Construction LLC and TFES LLC, represented by IMEG staff. And this is a request for properties in East Missoula, vacant lots next to 3705 Highway 200 East. So here's a broad aerial image for the East Missoula area with the site highlighted in a very bright green. So Castle Rock Construction and TFES LLC, represented by IMEG, have requested this revocation of the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation. The vacant property is also bound by Michigan Avenue and Minnesota Avenue between Clyde Street and Randall Street. These are legally described as lots 5 through 11 and lots 6 through 26 in block 19 of the East Missoula edition. So the property that is covered with this plan variation is currently vacant. It is zoned Cr3 residential with the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation. Surrounding land uses are also commercial and residential. So just talking about the base zoning district now, the Cr3 zoning district, the intent statement for this is to provide for high density, multiple family development and limited commercial and professional office uses that would be compatible with the adjoining residential uses in areas that are capable of being adequately served by public services. So zoning to the north, east, and west, the orange areas are CC2 general commercial. Properties to the southeast are unzoned. This site is also described in the 2019 Missoula area land use element, which was an amendment to the 2016 growth policy. And the land use element has a land use designation for this area, which is neighborhood center. Now, the neighborhood center land use designation is designed to be a neighborhood focal point and center of activity, providing opportunities for retail, service, and employment. Two additional goals of that neighborhood center land use are to provide services to residents within a 5 to 10 minute walk, and to accommodate a higher intensity residential choices that contribute to county-wide housing diversity. So now for some background on the plan variation itself. The plan variation, which is a amendment to particular zoning districts that provide differing standards that are separate from just the base zoning. This one was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners on December 7th, 2011, through the adoption of Resolution 2011-131. And the intent of this particular plan variation was to provide for attached housing units. And there are specific standards in there that I'll get to in a couple slides. So the standards were intended to provide adequate yard and building area and promote an aesthetic neighborhood quality, also a statement from the intent, while allowing for those attached housing units. So all provisions of the base Cr3 zoning apply to this property, except for the reduced or modified space and bulk requirements that I'll show here soon. And those modifications with the plan variation had to do with minimum lot size, minimum lot width, and side yard setbacks. So this is a development plan that is attached to this plan variation. And the plan variation is valid only in conjunction with a specific development and landscaping plan. So a development proposal for this property may only be approved for zoning compliance if it complies with elements of both the plan variation and its modified space and bulk standards, and this development plan has to exactly align with what you see here. So the maximum residential density in the Cr3 zoning district is 36 dwelling units per acre. You know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't I skip to this table where we can see a comparison of those standards. So for example, minimum lot width in the plan variation is 40 feet. The Cr3 zoning district is 50 feet. So the plan variation is a 10% reduction. The minimum lot size for the plan variation is 4,800 square feet. Cr3 zoning has a minimum lot size of 5,400 square feet. That's about a 11.2% reduction. Side yard setbacks were eliminated for most of the lots with that goal of having attached housing units that go down lot lines from the East Missoula addition. But otherwise front and rear setbacks still apply. Cr3 zoning has side yard setbacks of 5 feet or not less than 1/3 of the building height, whichever is greater. The maximum building height that I note here for the plan variation came from the application. This is not something that is specifically mandated in the plan variation, but I know this is an item of interest. So in the building renderings, in the building renderings from the plan variation application from 2011, it showed 2-story buildings. So that is part of that overall plan. Now the Cr3 zoning district has a maximum building height of 125 feet. Residential density, which I started to mention earlier, is up to 44 dwelling units per the, so up to 44 dwelling units, based on that development plan outline. And the Cr3 zoning district allows up to 59 dwelling units per acre. I'm sorry, I completely misspoke on that. So the Cr3 zoning district maximum residential density is 36 dwelling units per acre. Based on the square footage of this site, the property could accommodate up to 59 dwelling units per acre. That number, final number, may actually be less because of setback, parking, and landscaping requirements, grading and drainage, items such as that. So the applicant is requesting revocation of this plan variation. so that the option with developing the properties up to 59 dwelling units could be deemed zoning compliant. And as I said, the final number may change due to other zoning requirements that could chip away at the space needed for 59 units. So if the Canyon Gate Old Plan variation is revoked, like I said, that would result in the Cr3 zoning district and all provisions of the county zoning regulations being applicable to the subject property. The modified space and bulk requirements and the development plan that I showed just a few moments ago would no longer be applicable for this property. Revocation of the plan variation would not mandate or condition that a specific use or site plan be utilized. So any permitted conditional or special exception use that is listed for the Cr3 zoning district may be pursued if this variation is revoked. And just to summarize what those mean, a permitted use is allowed by right as long as it meets some general design standards in Chapter 3 of our zoning regulations. A conditional use is still administrative permit review, but it must meet some special design standards for particular uses that are listed in Chapter 4 of our zoning regulations. A special exception use has review criteria that are considered by the Board of Adjustment at a public meeting, and that is a board that makes final decisions as a quasi-judicial board. So those are final land use decisions for special exception. There are recommended findings, conclusions of law, and motions included with the staff report. Staff is recommending approval of this request. We did receive a total of 11 written comments and 1 verbal comment. So 12 total comments that are objecting to this request. Those are included with the packet tonight. And as I said, the Board of County Commissioners will hear this request again on December 9th. And I know that the applicant's representative is also on this call, and I'm also available for questions. So this concludes my presentation for this portion.
Great, thanks, Matt. Does the applicant want to do another presentation, or IMEG, I believe is
Yes, that's correct, Shane.
okay, great. Joe?
All right, let's see if I can figure this out. It's probably the wrong screen, isn't it?
Yeah, we're seeing the next slide screen on there too.
All right. Is that correct?
Yep, that looks good. And Joe, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know who you are and who you're representing, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my name is Joe Dennert. I'm a land use planner at IMEG here in Missoula, and we are representing Castle Rock Construction LLC. I'd like to start by thanking Matt Heimel and CAPS for their recommendation of approval for the plan variation revocation, and obviously thank members of the board and any of the public that are coming out this evening. Matt, you did a very thorough job of introducing this and laying the background. So to be frank, I'm going to probably zoom through this presentation because I had a lot prepared, catching everyone up to speed. As you saw in Matt's slides, this is the plan variation site approved in 2011. And as he mentioned, all the requirements of the Cr3 zoning apply to this, except for those modified in the development plan. Is it changing on your screen as I switch through the slides? Okay, just making sure. So this is the existing site as it stands now. Like Matt said, it's bounded by Michigan Avenue and Minnesota Avenue between Clyde and Randall Street there in East Missoula. And the property is currently vacant. As you can tell from these photos and any other aerial imagery you might reference, it's currently being used to park miscellaneous vehicles and as a shortcut to try to get between Michigan and Minnesota Ave. This is a view from a different angle, just highlighting the vacant lot and a rough outline of where our proposed plan is if this plan variation is revoked. Like Matt mentioned, we are located in the neighborhood center per the 2019 Missoula area land use element. It is designed to be a neighborhood focal point and really provide opportunities with a mix of residential, neighborhood services, offices, retail, and institutional uses. The proposed development aligns with the goals of the growth policy and would add more residents to the East Missoula community. Revocation of the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation would result in the Cr3 Zoning District and all provisions of the Missoula County zoning regulations being applicable to the subject property. Our proposed development plan adheres to the existing land use element and the existing Cr3 zoning regulations. Next year, when the proposed future zoning could occur, we would also meet those regulations, meaning that really the only thing our proposed plan doesn't adhere to right now is the plan variation, which is why we are asking for its revocation so we can align with the attended zoning for this area laid out in the growth policy. Matt showed this slide as well for the existing development plan. And this existing plan has 3 multiplex buildings, and this is what controls all development on the site as it stands now. These 3 multiplex buildings allows for a maximum of 44 units. And I wanted to show these 2 slides next to one another to show our proposed development plan. Granted, tonight we are just voting on the revocation of the plan variation, but the proposed development as the client sees it now is 3 multiplex buildings with the primary change being from 44 units to 59 units. Now, we completely understand that change in your community can be extremely painful, but we also see the potential for these existing vacant lots. The 2021 housing report from Missoula County shows an increase in demand for housing options with a significant decrease in supply. Current residents of East Missoula community are valid in their concerns, but I'd encourage current residents to weigh their concerns against the existing needs for housing in Missoula County as a whole. We value the public comments we've received up to this point, which are focused on neighborhood character, potential increase in traffic, alley access, visibility, light pollution, and the availability of utilities and public services. We fully anticipate there will be some opposition from the public, but it's worth noting to the board that I'm sure there are future families that could be living in this development that would most assuredly voice their support. If you're concerned about high buildings and an increased density, what we're proposing is the revocation of this plan variation, meaning that we have to adhere to the Cr3 zoning district as it stands now. There's a potential with the future zoning update that this area would be zoned in neighborhood center, which actually has a more flexible take on density in this area. So being concerned about increased density while waiting for the future zoning is really in opposition of that desire. With that, we ask you to offer a recommendation of approval for the revocation of the plan variation to the commissioners. And I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Joe. Are there any other presentations tonight? Seeing none. So that means we're moving on to public comment. If I could have Donna bring up our public comment slide, that'd be great. Thank you, Donna. So we'll open the public comment period. Again, the call-in numbers are on your screen. There's numbers for both cell phone users and landline users. Webinar IDs and passwords are included. In order to raise your hand to indicate that you would like to speak, you'll use *9 on your phone. And in order to mute and unmute, you'll use *6. When your when you're called on, we just ask that you say your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And if we do start getting a number of redundant comments, we would just ask that you start to say that you agree with the previous comments or disagree with the previous comments. So and with that, I'll go silent for a minute and we'll see what we come up with. Just give it another minute here. I'm not seeing anybody yet, Donna.
I am not either. Shall we go and see if there are any hands up in the participant room?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I do not see any hands up in the attendee room. I do see a caller. Let me. There's a phone call waiting that has the numbers 1770. Are you calling in to make a comment?
Yes, I would like to make a comment.
Could you go ahead, state your name and proceed with your comment?
My name is Stephanie Lemberg, and I did write a letter, which is included in the packet, and so did several other people, and I would encourage anyone to read those letters, and hopefully they have been read. But I would like to state also that there is new zoning coming, and we have been very much involved with Andrew Hagemeyer and the new zoning and the neighborhood center designations. And I understand that we are threatened frequently by these people that, well, you know, you could get something worse if you wait. Well, we're willing to take our chances. We have been working with trying to come up with a good neighborhood center. And I do not think that saying that waiting will possibly cause something worse, because waiting could also help us find something better that would be more suitable to our neighborhood. So I do not count that as a valid argument. And I really am opposed to a 3-story thing in the middle of the neighborhood surrounded by 1-story buildings that will forever be the tallest thing in East Missoula in the middle until somebody else builds something even taller. But that's my comment. And I did make other comments in my letter, and some of the other people who wrote letters also did. But I just wanted to respond to the belief that maybe we'll get something worse if the neighborhood center goes through, but maybe we won't. And I think it's too close to the time that the new zoning's coming in to make it. I think we should wait. I think there's a lot of things coming, and I think this is just jumping ahead of the cart. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, Stephanie. Not seeing any other hands raised. Seeing a few folks in the attendees. And if anybody in the attendees would like to comment, please raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you. And if not, then we'll move on. Okay, I'm not seeing any other movement. So with that, we will close the public comment period. And we will move on to planning board member questions. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand and we can direct them to staff or Joe. Dave.
I can't hear Dave. Shane, I
Yeah,
can't
Dave.
hear him.
Bad, thank you. Okay, so I want to just on this particular phase talk about neighborhood comments. I read them all and they're really well done. I heard Joe's response. I appreciate that. And I'm wondering if the planning staff had anything to say about how they dealt with the public comments, which are an essential part of any decision process. So I'm just wondering if there's anything out there from our staff about responding.
Yes, so I do not have a particular response to any one given comment. I did note a summary of comments in the staff report. If there are any particular questions, I'm happy to field those as they might arise from the comments. I did notice that comments were mostly targeted towards particular uses. And I'd like to note that the revocation of a plan variation does not result in approval or decision regarding any particular use, and that any use listed in CR3 is an applicable potential use if the plan variation were to be revoked.
So as a follow-up, may I? Two questions that come up in my mind and may or may not be, one is, of course, the CR3 allows 125 foot height. Number two is the traffic improvements out there in the frontage that may or may not be affected by this. Maybe staff has some comments about the imminent or non-imminent improvements out there on the state highway. I know that's been an issue there for a really long time. If there's any new news on that, that would probably help clarify this.
Sure. So Matt Heibel again here with CAPS. I'm aware of the Highway 200 Transportation Corridor Plan. There are no immediate plans that I know of to install, say, pedestrian infrastructure such as sidewalks on the frontage for these properties. If this were to be developed in accordance with either the plan variation, the zoning regulations, and by zoning regulations, it could either be our current or potential revised code, there would not be required off-site infrastructure improvements. Improvements to sidewalks and right-of-way, roads and other pedestrian items would fall under subdivision review, and that would follow other evaluation of the subdivision regulations, but just strictly in zoning, that does not trigger any necessary improvements.
Other questions? Josh.
This is maybe for Matt. Matt, if you could just succinctly kind of run through the key implications as a result of, the revocation of the plan variation. I guess my understanding is density, right? Up to an increase, maximum increase of 15 units, potential for increased building height. Is there anything else that I'm missing besides those two?
So those two are correct. So potential increase in the number of units, increase in the building height to a max of 125 feet. The only other items would be, as I said earlier, any permitted, conditional, or special exception use in the Cr3 zoning district could be sought. And I can put those on my screen so that we can all see what those entail.
So a broader array of permitted uses as well.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, it'd be great to understand exactly what those are and exactly what ones are permitted under the current status.
Okay, so I'm sharing just section 2.14 of our current code. This is just a sheet for the Cr3 district. Now the current plan variation only permits what you see in that site development plan, those attached housing units. That's pretty much all that would be allowed to be built right now. Now, if the plan variation is revoked, here is the Cr3. I'll go back to the top. So you can see 36 dwelling units per acre. That's up to 59 on the site. Increase in the minimum lot area, minimum lot width. Side setbacks would come back into play. Now, if someone were to try and build a structure that crosses lot lines here, that would be okay. They do not need to comply with internal side setbacks. Maximum building height, 125 feet, as noted. And then here are the permitted uses. So an array of housing types. Note that a multifamily building not more than 36 feet in height is permitted by right. Down under conditional uses, number 3, once it exceeds 36 feet in height, then it needs to meet extra standards in chapter 4, which mainly have to do with loading bays and parking location and some architectural certifications that they fit the neighborhood character. There's some other uses here that you can all see. Sorry.
I was going to say the existing status does not really allow for much mixed use development. Is that correct? It would just permit that semi-attached or attached multifamily project that you put on the screen earlier. I guess what I'm teasing at is that the neighborhood center is aimed at trying to provide, a center for activity, mixed use type of development. And if I'm understanding correctly, the current plan variation doesn't allow for that.
That is correct. That's all correct. I'm scrolling down to special exceptions.
A neighborhood center should be mixed use, provide services, center of activity, providing opportunities for retail, service, and employment. That would be possible under the Cr3 zoning designation if we rolled back the planned variation.
Yes, some mixed use development would be allowed in Cr3. Under conditional uses, you can see professional, business, governmental offices, personal services, daycare, some other non-residential uses. And then under special exceptions, any permitted uses allowed in the neighborhood commercial district is considered a special exception.
Okay, I guess I'm not really getting that it would provide for a real large array of mixed use development. I don't know. I don't see retail in there.
I may have misspoken. So retail is not considered just as a conditional use. So it may be considered as a special exception as one being allowed in the other commercial districts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Josh. We'll move to Tung.
Yeah, so I was kind of unclear. Obviously, building height is a big concern. So it wasn't clear to me that the current planning variation, it doesn't explicitly limit the building height. It just, or did it? Like I tried to find that and I couldn't. So, I mean, did the variation specifically limit the building height? And I also wanted to just share Josh's. I've shared Josh's concern as well, which is I think that the CR3, I read it as being somewhat limited with respect to mixed use. I didn't see a lot of opportunity there, but that's I think you did address that. But specifically on the height, can you speak to whether or not the plan variation specifically limited the height?
So the resolution that adopted the plan variation, to my knowledge, did not explicitly speak to building height. However, it does tie development to that specific development plan, which was for the 44 unit attached housing. Associated documents going back to the application for that had renderings for a 2-story height. So it's it's kind of a circular statement here. It didn't explicitly say it must be 2 stories, but to comply with the development plan, it would need to be a 2-story building to meet what was described in that resolution.
Right. So let me see if I can. So this is my interpretation of the situation, which was back in 2011, there was a plan variation that was tied to a very specific development plan. Didn't have specific things around height, but it just sort of by default, because of an existing plan, the plan variation kind of backed into that and codified that as a thing. Nothing eventually happened to that. So fast forward to today, nothing has been developed there, in part because of the limitations of that development plan. And now we're considering removing that. And the objections that we're hearing are specific to the current proposal. So we're actually talking about 2 very specific proposals as opposed to talking about the zoning as a whole. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ellie.
Hey, thanks. This has been very informative. I guess my first question is for Matt, in that, do we know what the proposed future zoning is right now for the zoning update?
Yeah, so Missoula County has a public review draft of our proposed zoning code available. Anyone can go see it at mczoningupdate.com. That draft is dated May 18th, 2021. And that draft is currently proposing a zoning district here called NC for neighborhood center.
Okay, sorry. I understand where that came up before. I just wasn't clear that was exactly what it was already proposed for. I thought that's what it was. And then there was this planned variation. So my other question then is pertaining to all the comments that we've received. Why not wait until the rezone? Will this plan explicitly not fit into the rezone? Is the timeline for the developer just wanting to do things before that comes into play? It's really a question for Joe, because that came up a lot in the comments.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and it's been danced around, and Matt's hit it a few times, and I think Tung actually just talked about it, where he was referencing, these 2 very specific proposals. If this plan variation is revoked, it does open up the Cr3 zoning and all permitted uses or conditional uses or special uses like Matt mentioned. And the plan that we've put forward is something that we've worked with the developer to create. That's what they would prefer there. That is still subject to change. They have to get zoning compliance. They have to go through all those different review processes. But regarding timeline, the neighborhood center, as I mentioned in my presentation, is more flexible. So, if we were to wait until neighborhood center, it would open up different options. It would have different availabilities. It does allow for a more dense development in this area. And the developer is, from my interpretation, is wanting to provide houses now. We believe that there's a need for houses now. And when you get into the process of delaying for hopes that this future zoning is passed, this could be 6 months to a year. This could be longer. There's still processes that have to go through for the zoning to be approved and accepted in Missoula County. And from their perspective, and we agree, passing the buck for a hope in the future can lead to some hangups. It can lead to potential for the project to change so much that the developer might not want to do it. And right now there's a developer that wants to provide houses in the area. Whatever that plan looks like is still in the works, but postponing it for the hopes that something better or something different might come to fruition, in their mind, doesn't quite make sense, because they're the property owner now and they would prefer to get this process started now, because there is a lot that goes into this. It's not going to happen overnight. By the time that they do come up with a plan, that they do follow all the correct permitting processes and zoning compliance and land use compliance, it could be a year and a half from now. There's extended timelines for all of these. So to answer your question directly, they're not chomping at the bit to try to get this in immediately for any sort of monetary issue or anything like that. It's more so, well, here's a zoning district that aligns with the growth policy. It aligns with the land use element. And there's this plan variation that's really restrictive. It only allows just houses. It only allows these specific types of layouts. And they're wanting to say, well, let's remove that plan variation and see what options lie ahead, see what we can do now while we still have the chance to, begin development and begin this process, and not wait for something that really has a loose timeline.
Thanks. And then I have one follow-up question to that. So if your plans don't get approved and move forward prior to the new zoning coming out, will you have to start that process over? What does that look like? And that might be a question for Matt. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's another really valid question. And Matt, I'm sure, can correct anything that I say that's incorrect. My understanding as it is now is projects that are approved, and it's different for subdivisions or for just development on a site, but projects that are approved under existing zoning are essentially vested, right? So they're vested for compliance with the zoning at the time of approval. So if we were to get something approved prior to this new zoning being enforced, then yes, it would be under the Cr3 designation. If not, if it was still in the works, if things hadn't been approved yet, then we would have to adhere to the new zoning. That's the way I understand it now. Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong.
In general, yeah, that's how vesting works. If permits come in, zoning compliance permits are approved prior to adoption, it will fall under the current zoning. They'll comply with that. But if zoning compliance permits are not approved prior to the effective date of new zoning, then you would have to come into compliance. And that's what's in the current draft, and it is subject to change prior to that zoning becoming final.
Andy.
Thank you. I guess I had a couple questions or thoughts, kind of building on the synergy we had with respect to this diversity or this neighborhood center plan that's being contemplated in a zoning update. It seems to me revoking this plan variation brings it closer in its base zoning of Cr3, provides more diversity. If the neighborhood center does come into fruition, that's even greater in alignment. So it seems like revoking it gets us closer, moving towards that ultimate game of the plan maps that were laid out in the vision, it seems like to me. I did have a question with respect to the map in the packet and the Cr3. I don't know, Matt, it's in your proposal. I don't know, page number 24. Well, it's 24 in the packet, I guess. It's the existing zoning map.
Have that loading. I'm ready for a question.
Okay, so this site is highlighted. Is that arbitrarily highlighted to identify the site, or is that the zoning map colors? Because it's all CC2 all around it. Then there's some CR3 like we talked about, and it's that lighter shading. And then I didn't know if that was artificial shading on this site. I guess my question, and I'm sure you're right, but it is the underlying zoning is CR3. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, there might be some label miss overlap. That lighter yellowish tan color is the CR3 zoning.
Okay.
Everything underlying the plan variation is CR3.
Okay, so that CC2 that surrounds it, it's an island of CR3 with this Ole's plan variation over that side only.
That is correct.
Okay, so the other question I had then, and it seems a little odd, and I'm sure you guys have been through this in the regulations, but if you have a base underlying zoning that permits you to do X, Y, Z, and someone comes in and has a vision and a plan in 2011 and says, I want to do this, is that not some kind of a bonus that gives them an option? But why this process to just revoke it? If someone else buys it and walks away, that resolution is so binding, it doesn't expire. It doesn't let them go back to the base zoning without this process?
That is correct. The plan variation runs with the land.
Okay. Final question, East Missoula Community Council. I didn't see anything in the packet from them. Did they provide any comment, or have we even heard from them?
I did not receive a comment directly signed by East Missoula Community Council. I did send them the request for comments during the agency notification process, and I did coordinate with Lee on making sure that the information was distributed.
Okay, so it was received, but just no comment was provided back from them.
Right, and maybe individual members did, but nothing directly signed by EMCC.
Okay, thank you.
Josh.
I just have a couple additional questions. I wonder if anybody on the call has any history of why the plan variation came into effect in the first place. Was it neighborhood driven? So that may provide some historical context for why it existed in the first place. Secondly, under new zoning, would the plan variation go away, or would it remain in effect and just the underlying base zoning would change?
Josh, I can try to.
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Matt.
I'll try to tackle the second question first. My understanding now is that with the new zoning, plan variations would be considered as legacy districts. So they will carry over, but that owners within the plan variations may opt in to the rezone. And since this is owned by one party, all these lots are just owned by a single entity, they could opt in to becoming rezoned with the update. I know Joe might have had something to say.
And the variation would then go away.
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. No, Josh, I was actually going to address the second portion as well, because I unfortunately can't comment on why it was created in the first place, but Matt covered all those bases and addressed it correctly.
So it doesn't sound like anybody can answer the first question. If that's true, then we'll move on to a question from Micah.
Shane, I could speak briefly to it if we don't want to move on to other questions first.
That'd be great. I guess what I'm trying to tease out here is, why was it created in the first place? Was there some type of neighborhood aesthetic that the community really wants to respect, or, I mean, just, there must have been a reason for it.
So in the application that we have in our files from 2011, a driver that came from, at the time, I guess with Hoffman Morgan and Associates, was citing the demand for apartment buildings at that time. And in reviewing the minutes from the multiple hearings on this item, my more or less theory on the intent behind it was that the plan variation would establish these apartments on modified lot lines, or not, I'm sorry, not modified lot lines, but lot lines that were then going to comply with zoning. So the East Missoula edition has lot sizes that are non-conforming, legal non-conforming. They were created prior to the zoning, and they're smaller than what the base Cr3 zoning allows. So while not explicitly stated in the documents, what I've inferred is that perhaps the intent was to avoid situations in the future regarding zoning nonconformities if they were intended to be used in some sort of townhome or condo exemption. But at the time, it was intended to just be rented.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I just have a couple of clarifying questions. So, so Matt, you mentioned that the plan variation went into place in part to allow for attached units. Has there been a change to the Cr3 zoning that it didn't allow attached units then, but it does now? That's been confusing me, because if we are reverting back to that, I see that it does allow attached units. Is that a change that has happened inside of that zoning?
Good question. My understanding is that the base zoning did not change, and that the plan variation, like I said, was going to create a situation where the nonconformities are eliminated, so that the minimum lot width, minimum lot size would conform to a zoning. Now, with the plan variation came a rezone. So the area was historically CC2, it became CR3, and then the plan variation was adopted after that, with the intent of modifying some space and bulk requirements.
Okay. And the plan variation follows the exact, it's just for this parcel, is that correct? It follows the exact same property lines. Like if we revoke it for this property, it's specific, is that correct?
Correct. It's specific to certain lots in the East Missoula edition.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Dave.
So my more of a comment than a question is, I believe that falling back to the original CR3 takes you farther away from the growth policy of neighborhood center. Even unlike less conforming to the growth policy of neighborhood center. And that's why I don't think removing the plan variation helps achieve that. And just setting aside the future zoning, that's not an issue here. What's at issue here is, what's the growth policy looking for? What do we have now as approved zoning, and what would it fall back to in CR3? And I think it's more inconsistent, and I don't see how I could support going back to the original zoning at this particular time, even though I'm looking forward to the community in East Missoula moving forward in the near future with new zoning and all that, but that's not a question here. Anyway, it's just, what I'm saying is we're moving farther away from the neighborhood center concept in the growth policy, and that's why I can't support this.
Are there other questions from planning board members before we move along to motions and discussions? maybe I'll just ask a couple. I guess maybe one or two. Most of them have been hit, but so the plan variation obviously has a pretty darn specific site plan, and that site plan indicates sidewalks and things like that, which one would assume that if the height that was represented in a rendering would need to be done, one would assume that the sidewalks and things like that from the site plan would also need to be built as a part of that development plan. And it seems to me like by revoking this plan variation, the community is actually getting less in terms of site infrastructure, because I think you noted, Matt, that the developer would not be on the hook to provide the sidewalks that are depicted in the original site plan. Would you say that that's true?
Matt, if you don't cover it, I'll comment on that after your response.
I'm just going to say I'm looking at it now and trying to infer the location of shown sidewalks against the property lines from that development plan that was adopted. It's not immediately clear to me whether they were on or off site. It is possible that they are off site for this site plan, in which they are shown on this plan. I'm not aware of a mechanism to strictly require that, but it could certainly be coordinated with Missoula County Public Works if construction according to the plan variation is to include sidewalks. But I'm still looking at the.
I mean, I'm looking at a note that says new sidewalk on the development plan, and I guess what I'm getting at is that reverting back to the base zoning district could actually seemingly strip the community of something that could be in the community good. And it's one of the questions that was outlined by, some of the residents. We don't have the public infrastructure for sidewalks and things like that. And I'm wondering if there is a mechanism here where some amount of public amenity could be included, and that would be a question for staff. I know we can't burden, we can't condition a zoning district, even though it seems like we did condition a zoning district in 2011 in some ways, but you know what I'm getting at,
Yeah, Shane, I'd like to provide some context, and then Matt, feel free to respond for conditions that I might have missed. But I believe Matt was referencing earlier when he was talking about the sidewalks around Highway 200, and I could be incorrect, but for the proposed development plan, that we're proposing, there are improvements, but just generally, there would need to be a landscaping plan, a boulevard plan, et cetera. We have to adhere to ADA ramps. And so, the proposed development plan that we've looked at for this area, if it is revoked, does have those frontage improvements, including sidewalk, including curb, including landscaping plans. And regardless of whether or not that specific plan goes through, not revoking the plan variation could have, like Matt said, on-site sidewalks, or they could be off-site, but there could be works could work with public works there. But if we were to propose a development plan, we would be required to provide those frontage improvements. Public works would trigger that, I believe.
Okay, so I think what I'm understanding, Joe, is that if you do develop the site, the onus of putting in sidewalks around your site for public use is on you guys.
My understanding at this point is yes, the on-site proposal for sidewalks, for boulevard or landscaping plans. All of those things are provided by the developer.
Okay. Matt, there's not a ton of comments, or there's not a ton of agency review in some of these things from the county, but are there any concerns regarding infrastructure, water, sewer, anything like that? I couldn't tease anything out of the staff report, but is there anything that the community should be worried about in terms of that infrastructure being in place?
I did not receive agency comments specific to concerns over infrastructure being in place. I did receive a general comment from the health department noting that the project needs to go through sanitation review as applicable. Montana Department of Transportation provided a comment about how approaches need to be adequately marked with property traffic control devices, but no other specific concerns. And I would like to circle back and provide some clarification about the off-site sidewalks, if that is appropriate.
Please.
So Joe mentioned being on the hook for on-site improvements associated with landscape requirements, and that's all correct. And I really like to emphasize the key points there being on-site. So currently, the zoning cannot require an off-site infrastructure improvement such as the sidewalks. So zoning can mandate things on-site such as height, which is why we can infer the building height limitations there. But when we see details such as what's shown on the existing plan being sidewalks within the right-of-way, those would not be mandated by zoning or would be required with the current development plan. Any of those improvements would need to be approved by County Public Works. And I'm not aware of a mechanism by which applying for a multi-family or commercial permit then triggers those sidewalk improvements. I know that there may be some mechanisms such as that within the city of Missoula. However, for county permit reviews, those sidewalks do not necessarily get triggered just by having a permit go in. I mentioned earlier tonight that subdivision review does have mechanisms for review that deal with street improvements, sidewalk improvements, such as those, but no such improvements can be mandated by our zoning regulations for offsite.
Josh.
I apologize if I'm being dense and extending this question period longer than it needs to. But maybe, Matt, if you could clarify, is the maximum building height 125 feet? Could they build a multifamily building of 125 feet? Or is the maximum multifamily building height 36 feet? It's unclear to me in the Cr3 zoning.
So in the Cr3 district, you can build any building up to 125 feet. Multi-dwelling buildings have a distinction between whether it's a permitted use or a conditional use. If the multifamily building is going to be no more than 36 feet, then it is permitted. Once it exceeds 36 feet, there are some extra design standards in Chapter 4 of our zoning, but it could go up to 125 feet. Side setbacks would then be about 41.6 or 42 feet approximately, because it needs to be 1/3 the building height.
Got it. So there's additional requirements as the height exceeds 36 feet.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Circling back and back around on this, I do want to point out, and I do believe it's worth mentioning, regarding the proposed project, whatever that may be, if this is revoked, that whatever development that does occur there would also have to comply with the Fair Housing Act as well. So in compliance with the Fair Housing Act, you have to include access to the public way. And so there are additional improvements that are required in that case. And, you know, in this specific conversation, I know we're talking about revoking the plan variation, but it's hard to separate the two from plan variation and what might be coming next. But I thought it was worth mentioning. Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, we should move on to a motion and comment period. So if anybody has a motion that they'd like to put out there.
Would it be possible to get that motion back on the screen? I move that the request to revoke the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation be approved based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law contained in the staff report.
Thank you, Micah. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
I think Tom got it. Discussion. Does anybody want to lead us off? Josh, go ahead.
I can try. I guess revocation, in my opinion, and it differs, I think, from Dave's opinion, but my opinion is that it would allow for greater flexibility to develop a project more in line with the neighborhood center designation. Just because the site plan and development plan that we saw was pure residential. That being said, it only provides for the potential for that outcome in my mind. It also provides for the outcome for the developer to go vertical, 125 feet, pure play, 59 unit multifamily building, and not really deliver on the neighborhood center, I think, vision for this area. I mean, you lower your construction costs as you go vertical per square foot, and, you know, per unit, per key. So that, I mean, given where we're at, that probably makes sense from a development standpoint, I would think. I don't know that, I'm not the developer, but, you know, maybe the case. I think I'm inclined to support this, but I would just urge the developer to please consider what neighborhood center designation means. And it means mixed use to provide services, a center of activity, and opportunities for retail, service, and employment. So I guess to summarize, I'm inclined to support this, but I would hope that the developer takes that to heart in their updated development plan.
Thanks, Josh. We'll go to Ellie.
Sorry, I'm sort of on the same train as Josh, that I feel like it moves it more towards the possibility of that potential happening of the neighborhood center. And so I wanted Dave to kind of elaborate on his previous comment.
Let's go to Dave then.
So I'm going to say what I've already said in the earlier discussion, but I don't think either project bodes well for the community of East Missoula. But the existing project with a plan variation attached to it, they know what they're getting, and they've known it for a number of years. It is not inconsistent with what's going on there. However, the Cr3, I believe, is inconsistent with the growth plan that's already adopted, and it won't ever get you to the neighborhood center, and that's why I'm against it.
Any other discussion?
I guess, yeah, this is my understanding is that the intent of the CR3 zoning district is to provide for high density multifamily development and limited commercial and professional office uses. Is that a correct interpretation of CR3? Because in my mind, that does move us towards neighborhood center. Multifamily, professional office, and limited commercial.
Would you like Matt to answer that?
Yeah, maybe Matt or Joe, yeah, somebody. Yeah.
Yes, that was a correct summary of the intent.
So then maybe I just want to understand Dave too, Dave's concerns as to why he thinks maybe it doesn't move us in that direction. There's something we're just not seeing.
Well, I'll be happy to respond. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay, so taking away the plan variation gives any developer, including this one, the opportunity to build something even more inconsistent with neighborhood center. And that's why, and after listening to folks and reading the letters from the folks in East Missoula, I just don't think taking the moving to just the plain CR3 gives you moves you in the direction of a neighborhood center. I think it moves you away from it, and that's my take on it.
Thanks, Dave.
Any other comments or discussion?
I guess my concern is that it offers the potential to get you closer to neighborhood center based on what the new development plan is. But I can share maybe Dave's concern that it could go the opposite direction too. That potential exists. So yeah, I'm a bit torn.
Let's go to Ellie.
Well, some of the comments about, I feel like we're kind of going in circles and we're spinning a little bit. And some of the comments, it's strange for me, I feel like, to be quoting back to the developers, but that we're making too was that, well, there is a big need for housing right now. And I think that that is actually true for what we're seeing in the area, and that 44 to 59, I don't know, that doesn't feel like an insane jump to me. That being said, I really take to heart all of the residents' comments who live in the area, and especially was it Stephanie who came on and actually spoke to us and was making comments that they've been working with, and the residents have been closely working with the zoning updates for the county. And so they feel like they're a part of that process, as opposed to this one, which does kind of bode for that neighborhood center idea to come when there's neighborhood engagement. So just kind of working this out with you guys. Those are some more thoughts we can all chew on.
Micah.
Yeah, I'm definitely a bit torn as well. I think I'm inclined to support revoking the plan variation because it is a plan that was put in place 10 years ago by a previous, there's a whole previous plan, and it's very restrictive to this specific design that has no capacity to be updated. And so I share the concerns that, we don't know what's going to come with the revocation, but keeping the existing variation in place doesn't make sense to me and seems like leaving a roadblock in place instead of moving forward. So I think I'm inclined to support this.
Josh.
I would maybe just piggyback on that and say, you know, the fact that nothing has been done for 10 years with this plan variation in place means that maybe, have 44 units not come to market because this plan is maybe not feasible from a development perspective, given the plan variation. I don't know, but something to think about maybe.
Matt, can I ask you one more question? And sorry, I'm just picking up on this now, but I think you said that in 2011, it went not only was the plan variation put in, but it also changed from a C-C2 to the C-R3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there any consideration given to bringing it back to what it originally was pre-2011?
So there was a rezone request. I think it was summer of 2020. And that request was to go back to CC1, and that was not approved.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I guess I'm a little bit torn on this. I'm inclined to support it, I believe. And I do think that, I hear Dave's concerns and I hear the community's concerns. And, at the same time, I do think that, the underlying CR-3 does open up development potential to make this a real neighborhood center, and our new zoning will be passed in the next 6 months or a year, hopefully. And if the developer doesn't get started immediately on this, then it will ultimately go to the new zoning. So I think that I'm inclined to support this. And if there aren't any other comments, we'll call a vote. We'll do a roll call vote, please, Donna, if you wouldn't mind.
Very good. Josh Schrader.
Aye.
Josh Schrader votes yes. Andy Mefford.
Yes.
Andy Mefford votes yes. Dave Loomis.
No.
Dave Loomis votes no. Micah Sewell.
Yes.
Micah Sewell votes yes. Toon Pham.
Yes.
Toon Pham votes yes. Ellie Costello.
Yes.
Ellie Costello votes yes. Shane Morrissey.
Yes.
Shane Morrissey votes yes. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much for everyone's time and consideration. I appreciate it.
Our next presentation is consideration of the West Broadway Gateway Master Plan as an amendment to the Downtown Missoula Master Plan and as an amendment to the City Growth Policy. And Annette with MRA is presenting, maybe, or somebody else, or Rob.
Yes, hello. My name is Rob Piatkowski with Dover Cullen Partners, town planner, urban designer, and project manager, and working with Annette at the MRA and Linda McCarthy at the BID on this planning effort. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen and share the presentation, if that's all right with y'all. All right, so are you able to see the screen?
Yep, we got you, Rob.
Great. All right. So let's get started. So just starting off again, my name is Rob Pietkowski, town planner and urban designer at Dover Cole and Partners. And we'll start off with a few background slides to provide some information on the project, where it came from. The project's being funded by the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, as well as funds coming from the Big Sky Trust Fund through a planning grant that went to the Business Improvement District and Missoula Economic Development Partnership. Our project steering committee has been involved throughout the entire process, starting off way in the beginning. It consists of a mix of Missoula residents and business owners, so business property owners, the mayor, city council members from the respective districts, community planning and members, Department of Public Works, myself and Jason King from Dover Cole Partners, the Missoula Business Improvement District with Linda McCarthy, representatives from the Economic Partnership, Redevelopment Agency, Department of Transportation, and the North Side, West Side Neighborhood Council. And I just want to thank all of the members of our steering committee for all their time and commitment reviewing multiple drafts of the document over the past couple months, and for all the effort along the way. We've met with many stakeholder groups, specifically with business and property owners within our study area, business and property owners adjacent to the study area, developers, social service providers, financial institutions, housing advocates, residents from the surrounding neighborhood and within the study area, the technical committees from parks and environmental and transportation and public safety. We've had a fairly robust community planning process, really kicking off with a 5-day virtual design charrette, April 5th to 9th of this year. It included 3 in-person events in addition to the majority of the online virtual events. We have 2 interactive project websites. Printed copies of the initial and final drafts have been located several places in the city. We've had a social media and direct email outreach effort. There was an informational booth at the North Side, West Side Block Party in the beginning of October. We had 2 virtual public input sessions on the draft plan and the final draft plan, October 7th and November 9th, respectively. In partnership, in collaboration with Cr3, we've created a neighborhood survey, which was delivered door to door to the North Side, West Side neighborhood. And we had 66 respondents to date, and that will continue. We'll continue to collect respondents to help guide this plan and for the plan's implementation. And there's been direct communication between Dover Cole and MRA and Business Improvement District throughout the entire planning process. So again, we kicked off early February 2021, earlier this year. Virtual design charrette, again, was April 5th to 9th. And now we're nearing the end of our planning process and moving into plan approval and adoption process. We've spoken to or heard from over 340 individual people, whether directly in meetings, in-person meetings, online, people attending the various events we've hosted digitally, or responding to our surveys, whether digital surveys or in-person or paper surveys that were distributed throughout the neighborhood. Part of our process in terms of getting feedback, these are always interesting. These are responses to our one-word card, basically during the charrette, and on the project website, there's a chance for people to respond to the question to provide one word that comes to mind about the West Broadway area now. The more times a word is submitted, the bigger it comes up. And so you can see potential is the word that came up the most, meaning the most frequently submitted word about what the current conditions of the area is potential. And you also see forgotten and undeveloped and run down, inaccessible. But then there's also things like affordable. And so these are in riverfront. And river. So these are things that have mixed connotations. People feel that the area has a lot to offer, but our job working with the community was to see what that means. And to help guide us with that, we asked a similar question, one word that comes to mind about the West Broadway area in the future. And here you see gateway and community come really big, as well as river and affordable and accessible and vibrant and walkable. So there's a lot of hopeful words, but also a lot of words that need more explanation. So what does it mean by gateway? What does it mean by affordable and accessible and community? So these are sort of nebulous words. And so through the course of the process, we worked with the community and the stakeholders to help hone in on what the meanings mean. What does community mean? In the draft plan, if you've had a chance to review it, you'll see that we've summarized a lot of information. We had community image survey where we asked for responses to help us understand the types of buildings, whether they're residential or commercial mixed use, the types of streets and public spaces and civic buildings people would like to see. During the SHREP, we did a lot of live drawing and created initial concepts and plans that really formed the framework for the rest of the plan development. And at the end of the SHREP, at the work in progress presentation on that Friday evening, we asked those in attendance what they thought of the different ideas. And these were the responses that we got back. And we took these and worked with them and used this over the last several months since the SHREP to draft the full plan that we're sharing tonight. So on that night, we asked the work in progress presentation, we asked, based on what you heard tonight, do you think the draft plan is on the right track? And of those in attendance and voting online, 80% said yes or probably yes. At our draft plan presentation on October 7th, we presented back to the public the updated draft plan, and we asked the same question, do you still think the draft plan is on the right track? And again, we had 80% that said yes or probably yes. And we've been keeping tallies of who we've been speaking to, how many people, and the outreach that we've been getting. The website, envisionwestbroadway.com, has had pretty great traffic. Over 2,500 unique visitors have gone to the website over the past several months. All of our public meetings have been recorded and posted online for additional people to watch on YouTube. So if they're not able to attend one of the meetings live, they can watch it at their convenience and provide their comments online. And the neighborhood survey, in partnership with Cr3 and the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, was created and handed out and distributed across the neighborhood. And we've got over about 66 respondents back. And it was a really great survey, and we were able to reach a lot more people that hadn't been a part of the process beforehand. So around 88% of the people that responded to this paper survey had not participated yet in the planning process. So it was great to reach a broader spectrum and a broader group of residents. But also 89% of the respondents supported the mixed use concept and development shown in the plan. And so that was a testament to the other people that we spoke to and the work done so far. So all of that leads up to the Envision West Broadway Community Master Plan, the draft that I'll be sharing with you. The study area is around 15 acres or so between West Broadway Street, Clark Fork River on the north and south, North Russell Street on the west, and California Street on the east. The area is less than 1 mile from downtown, has access to the Riverfront Trail. It's within Urban Renewal District 2 and Opportunity Zones. And it's at the intersection of two of the key streets in downtown Missoula, West Broadway and Russell Street. Where this planning process came from, it's an extension of the downtown master plan from 2019. And this spread shown here is taken from that downtown master plan, and it talks about the West Broadway area at the time called the West Broadway Gateway area. It talks about new housing opportunities, street-oriented buildings that face Broadway, wide sidewalks with street furniture, intersection redesigns and pedestrian crossings, extending the Riverfront Trail, and adding affordable retail and restaurant space. And from that, we've moved from the higher level of the downtown master plan to a more focused level of this community master plan, looking at this specific site. And throughout this entire process, we've created these 5 big ideas. And these are, while specific details of the plan may change over time as it's implemented, these 5 big ideas should really remain intact. And these, for the most part, summarize the feedback that we've gotten and the work created during the SHREP and throughout the additional meetings we've held over the several months. So the first one is build the next great Missoula neighborhood center. Second is be a good neighbor and respect local businesses currently on site. Third is connect to the river and complete the path system. The fourth is help solve housing and commercial space affordability issues. And the fifth is create unique entry experience to urban Missoula. I'll now run through each of these big ideas fairly quickly. So the first one, build the next great Missoula neighborhood center. So these are all pages from the draft plan. For each of the big idea that starts off with a summary page much like this. So for big idea one, it's to become a complete urban place, a place for members of the community, both the local neighborhoods as well as the Missoula community as a whole, to be able to come to public space or a forum to gather and hold events, and for residential units to face on, and commercial and businesses and community spaces to face on and have great addresses. The next is to be the next hip neighborhood, and to create high quality, welcoming public spaces for all, and then to create safe, comfortable, and interesting streets. This section of the plan really focuses on the physical form of what a neighborhood center is. So it talks about fronts and backs of buildings, how streets should be designed, the building to street relationship or frontages, and how parking should be located within the urban development pattern. It gives guidance for how development should occur. Some of the key features are creating a new main street and public square. From West Broadway Street, the plan envisions a new main street perpendicular to West Broadway Street. And along this would be the Long Green or a new public square. What this does is it provides an additional connection from the residential West Side neighborhood north of West Broadway Street, starting to work its way down towards the Clark Fork River. It breaks up the large Missoula water block into smaller blocks, creates new frontages for addresses for residential uses or businesses and offices or community spaces. And it does so on a street that we have control over. West Broadway Street's the state road. How much influence the city has over it is sort of minimal. But by creating the perpendicular street, it's something that the city will have complete control over the design to ensure that it could be a walkable and pleasant place to be in. And it also provides additional spaces for on-street parking. And the entire space is envisioned to be able to be closed off for special events and function as one larger plaza. The plan also looks at the existing streets in the area, starting at Hillsdale Street, how they can be retrofitted, adding green infrastructure and traffic calming and on-street parking, for Cedar Street as well, and for North California Street. Second big idea is to be a good neighbor and respect the local businesses currently on site. There's a lot of really great businesses along both the north and south side of West Broadway Street and within the planning area. So retained valued businesses should remain. The plan wants to make the option for redevelopment available to all property owners within the site, but allow local businesses and existing businesses to remain if that's what they choose to do. The plan also provides strategies to become a local destination, a place that focuses on local serving uses and amenities. Through the planning process, through our surveys, and specifically with the survey with Cr3 and MRA, we were able to hone in on what some of those local serving uses desired by the community could be. They range from restaurants and cafes to daycare, community space, laundromat, corner store, grocery, art studios, and incubator space. The plan talks about encouraging local ownership and insisting locally owned businesses and retail, as well as establishing a maker district. The area has a lot of entrepreneurs and light industrial uses. And so the plan supports the continuation of these uses and to build upon them. It also includes several strategies specifically aimed to support the local business community through helping to broaden ownership, making sure the zoning and development regulations support local businesses, and providing access to capital. Big idea 3 is to connect to the river and complete the path system. This includes increasing access to parks and nature. The plan recommends new green spaces and public spaces and recommends that all the open space developed in this plan, whether it's created through the city or as the required space for a development, should be consolidated into larger and publicly accessible green spaces and park spaces. The plan recommends connections to the river and completing the path system. The Ron's River Trail runs along the south side of the area, the study area, and it connects to downtown, but there's gaps, so the plan recommends filling that gap around Orange Street to allow greater connection to downtown on the north side of the river, and adding street trees and shade and pedestrian scaled lighting along this section of the trail adjacent and within the study area. The plan also recommends to build sustainably. For parks and open space and public space, plan recommends the long green, which is shown here, to continue all the way from West Broadway Street down to the Clark Fork River. And along the way, it would have different character and different amenities and different programming. An interesting opportunity has arisen around the southern edge of this long green where the number 3 is here. The city has taken control of the easement for the Flynn ditch. And so there's new opportunities to reimagine now what becomes of that space. In the areas where the city owns the underlying land, it might be possible to create new park space there. And so there's new opportunities to explore. Also, downtown Lions Park has a new plan that was adopted last year in 2020. That's directly adjacent to the study area. There, they recommend the creation of community gardens and a playground. And so for this site, the plan recommends, could be additional community gardens, something that we heard many times, but perhaps not a full playground, but natural play areas or climbing areas or a smaller playground for children. So I'll take you on a quick tour of what that long green can look like. At the northern section, it's really envisioned as a shared public space, the public plaza, the heart of the neighborhood center. Businesses and shops would front on it. There'd be space for outside dining and for the restaurants and cafes, but also space in the middle for the general public or people who aren't shopping or visiting or dining at one of the locations to have places to sit and relax and also enjoy the public space. Moving further south, the plan envisions a children's play area to bring in more family-friendly amenities and a new overlook to provide increased waterfront views along the river and the mountains down to the south. The plan recommends low-impact development and offers several toolkits in terms of where different types of green infrastructure should be utilized throughout the site. And the plan recommends bikeability improvements as well, closing the gap along Ron's River Trail, expanding the network with the spur from Ron's River Trail up through the Long Green, including bicycle parking, both short-term and long-term within development, and improving the crossing across West Broadway Street. So we'll talk about the West Broadway Street just a little bit. And in terms of sustainable practices, it talks about zero waste facilities, reducing energy consumption, and sustainable buildings. Probably one of the most important parts of the plan is this idea, big idea for helping solve the housing and rental space affordability issues, or probably now it's almost at a crisis level. So the guiding principles here are living spaces and places for all and affordable housing. As you probably already know, housing prices in Missoula have increased dramatically. In just 10 years, they've gone from median home price being $200,000 to doubling to over $400,000. So the plan recommends a series of strategies for addressing affordable housing in this area. A large portion of the site is owned by the city, and so the city has quite a bit of control over what development occurs within the West Broadway area, and that's an impetus for doing this planning process. And so a lot of these strategies are really tied to how to take advantage of city-owned land for creating a neighborhood center that serves the local community, that meets the downtown master plan goals and policies, and that provides affordable housing as well as market rate housing for the city. These strategies tie to zoning and planning, the project approval process, including streamlining development approval and entitlement process, ways to reduce or reimburse impact fees, and various financing and funding, including low-income housing tax credits, TIF funds to subsidize the construction of public infrastructure, TIF funds to incentivize affordable housing on privately held parcels, making use of the city Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and new market tax credits. So these strategies are geared specifically towards creating affordable housing, both on city-owned land to help finance it and as incentives to encourage affordable housing development on the privately owned land. So leveraging the city-owned land, including the Missoula water site and adjacent parcels and this Sleepy Inn site, are really essential to being able to create affordable housing in this area, in addition to market rate housing. So the plan recommends partnerships. So developing city-owned parcels through a public-private partnership or joint development with a for-profit developer. This would allow the city to put, the city would be able to utilize the land to reduce the development costs in return for getting affordable housing and permanently affordable housing. When I speak of affordable housing here, the plan recommends permanently affordable. It could also be a partnership with a nonprofit developer or community land trust, or in coordination with Missoula Housing Authority. The plan also recommends strategies for tenant support and assistance, so expanding housing choice voucher program, protecting existing residential residents within the area. Right now, there's just about two or three residential units. Most of the area is commercial or owned by the city, and limiting short-term rentals to ensure that the housing that's created as affordable housing is for Missoula residents. And the plan has recommended permanently affordable housing targets. These are based on area median income, AMI. So the plan recommends 18 to 25 units for households earning up to 30% of AMI, 18 to 25 units for households earning between 30 and 80% of AMI, and 14 to 20 units of households earning between 80 and 120% AMI. And the last idea is big idea 5, to create a unique entry experience into urban Missoula. Right now, when you're arriving from the airport or points west, the entrance into Missoula is, you don't quite realize what a special place it is and what a great neighborhood you're approaching and driving through. You just pass through the neighborhood until you get to downtown. And so utilizing this plan to help create a center and create a welcoming gateway to the north side, west side neighborhood, as well as to urban Missoula. And a big part of this is reimagining what West Broadway Street can be. MDT, Montana Department of Transportation, is doing a planning study for the area, and this plan that we're working on now, we're hoping to influence their designs and get new features incorporated into the ultimate redesign of West Broadway Street. Perhaps some of the most important are a new safe crossing at Burn Street that would connect from the neighborhoods to the north to the Long Green. This would allow, facilitate greater connectivity. That's probably one of the things we heard the most, is making it safer to cross West Broadway Street, as well as implementing a roundabout at North California Street, Toole, and West Broadway Street. These are recommendations from the plan, and it would have to be done in coordination with MDT and through continuing conversations. But the plan provides guidance and support for the city's vision for what the future of the street could be. And this includes cycle tracks, raised cycle tracks, street trees, and bus stops and shelters for Mountain Line. And this plan, this interim design shown here is set up such that in the future, 20 years down the road, if travel demands change quite significantly, the street can be retrofitted to become a true urban downtown street, where the outer lanes in each direction could be transformed into on-street parking with tree bulb outs and additional buffer given to the elevated cycle track shown here. So again, these are recommendations, and this would have to be done in coordination with Department of Transportation. And this is the illustrative plan. This depicts the potential future build out for the West Broadway area. It's not construction documents. This is not exactly how it would get built, but it illustrates key concepts and a guiding vision for what the area could be. The gray squares represent existing buildings, and the reddish pinkish ones are proposed buildings. And I'll walk through the phasing now. In orange highlighted are the city-owned land, so Sleepy Inn, Missoula Water, and some adjacent buildings. So these are the areas that have the most potential for change. The city has the most control over what happens through the development, through public-private partnerships and requests for proposals. And so this is really to set the stage for what the rest of the area could become. And A lot of the affordable housing should also be targeted for these areas due to the ability to reduce the development cost, because the land cost can be reduced or significantly lowered. So phase 1 imagines the Sleepy Inn site transforming, as well as new improvements to West Broadway Street. Later, next, when Missoula Water relocates, that site has the potential to redevelop and to create a new complete space. So a new complete block could be happening. And this, by this phase alone, you could have a great neighborhood center, because you control and have design control and influence over the uses that go in to this new space, from block face to, from building face to building face across this new public space. Next, you can imagine land being developed to the south, working in coordination with property owners, and the continuation of the long green to connect all the way from West Broadway Street down to the river. And then when we show the proposed development program, it's essentially based on this phase. And what happens after this occurs on privately owned land. And so this is just a vision looking out into the future of what could happen. This would depend on individual property owners doing what's best in their interest, the incentives that the city and other agencies offer, but it provides guidance in terms of buildings fronting the street, creating new blocks, creating accessible and open public spaces, and creating and building out a walkable, complete neighborhood center. So pulling it all together, the plan calls for approximately 20 to 30,000 square feet of space for retail and restaurants, 10 to 15,000 square feet of space for offices or community space, 100 to 130 market rate townhomes and apartments, and 50 to 70 affordable units targeted to these amounts. Parking is a key issue. The plan shows parking on street as well as in mid-block locations. And the plan also recommends 4 to 6 story buildings, although the existing zoning allows for taller buildings. And so really, for better or worse, it comes down to parking, how much parking is needed or required. The plan recommends reducing parking requirements for affordable housing to have more space available for development of housing instead of car storage. And that's why the other mobility components are extremely important for improved trail access, improved transit access, and creating safer ways to cross and get across West Broadway Street. And lastly, implementation. The plan provides an overview of how this would be implemented, the role of the MRA and others in the development of public property, and how changes would occur on private property. And it takes the strategies that we talked about and throughout the 100 pages of the document and puts them into a matrix organized by big ideas. Last slide, next steps and approvals. There'll be presentations for the City Council Land Use and Planning Committee tomorrow, MRA board presentation on the 18th, neighborhood forum on the 18th, and going to City Council in December. This timeline is somewhat condensed because of the Big Sky Trust Fund. The complete adopted plan has to be submitted. The final draft plan has to be submitted by the end of this year in order to qualify for the grant funding. We've had extensions in order to accommodate additional public feedback, which has proved to be extremely valuable, and really grateful for the being able to work with the community and crew to get that additional feedback and to open up the planning process to people that hadn't normally participated. But this is our schedule for moving forward. So that was a lot. Thank you for listening to a presentation for the last 20 or 30 minutes, and I'd like to open it up to questions or comments.
Before we go there, I'd like to jump in if that's okay. My name is Linda McCarthy and I'm with the Downtown Business Improvement District. We've had a chance to work with Dover Cole for the last 4 years, and this is a deeper dive on the downtown master plan and is what we would call an addendum to that, which was approved in 2019. Dover Cole has done a great job of, taking the feedback from our community and turning it into, active, forward-thinking plan. And as you know, these plans do 2 things. They help provide a process by which, the community and neighbors can provide input on what they want in their neighborhood. And it also provides some predictability for investors, for developers, for property owners and businesses. I'd like to pause for a minute and ask tonight's administrator to let Annette Marshall from the Missoula Redevelopment Agency into the meeting. She is under attendees under Market Master. And, you know, she has been the lead staff on this planning process throughout the course of the last year. And it is through that partnership with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency and Dover Coal that, you know, we've been able to put forth you know, a plan for the specific part of our community that isn't as specific to the street as it is to, you know, the area between the street and the river, between Russell and California. So Robert, great job today. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think we're all available to field questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Rob. So we'll move into our public comment period first before we field questions from planning board members. Rob, if I could have you give the screen back so that Donna can put up the call-in information. So we're going to open up the public comment period. Again, all the call-in information is on the screen now. There's call-in numbers for both cell phone and landline users. The webinar ID number is 842-9399-6424. Password is 999636. You have to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute. And please remember to mute any background devices that you might have playing, since there is a lag. With that, I'll just pause for a few minutes and we'll see if anybody wants to call in and voice any questions or concerns. Not seeing anybody raise their hand. Donna, I see a couple of folks in the attendees, Diane and Pam. If Diane and Pam would like to comment, if you could raise your hand. If not, that's also okay. All right, I guess with that, we'll close the public comment period and we'll move on to questions from planning board members. Anybody want to get us kicked off? Oh.
So you kind of alluded to this. So first of all, it's a great presentation. It's really exciting to see a lot of potential in that area. You sort of alluded to it, but do you have any more information with respect to support of the private land? You know, so obviously the big chunk is the Blue Ribbon Auto. Do you have any thoughts on, you know, what would happen to that if the current owners decide to stay or choose not to do anything? Like, well, how would that impact the plan?
Right. So we have talked to Blue Ribbon Auto sometimes, and they you know, they have their own vision for what their future of their business. And so the plan is designed to function basically as that phase 2 or 3. So with that, you're able to create that new perpendicular main street and plaza. And so within that area, you'd be able to create a lot of the activity, a lot of the new green space, have space for affordable housing, market rate housing, and various commercial uses. So even if the other privately held land, whether it's Blue Ribbon Auto or others, didn't change, the plan would still be able to create a new neighborhood center. It would just be of a smaller scale and size and less residential density. But the plan does offer and suggest various incentives to encourage private landowners to develop in accordance to the plan. So because of its location within the urban renewal district, TIF funding can be used to incentivize redevelopment. If a landowner would like to redevelop, TIF funding could help support them if certain criteria are met, and those are established. That could be, to meet the plan goals of creating walkable urbanism or incorporating affordable housing. But the underlying zoning for Blue Ribbon Auto is a PUD. The rest of the area is commercial, similar to the downtown, so it really allows for quite a bit of development to occur. And it's also within the design excellence overlay gateway district area, which adds some additional criteria for how things should develop. So the plan envisions and provides guidance for what private property owners could do, but it's also set up such that it could be successful in terms of placemaking if nothing happens for a long time.
Great. And then a quick follow-up. So you talked a lot about parking as well. So I guess my first question that's related is, did you envision this as more of a neighborhood center, meaning like with the kind of servicing obviously the new housing developments and then the surrounding areas across from West Broadway? Or would this be in some senses a destination for Missoula as a whole? And the reason I ask that is that obviously has implications for parking. If this was intended to be more of a destination with thriving businesses that people would want to visit, then you would obviously need more parking, or certainly parking would become an issue. So if you could speak more to that.
Sure. So a lot of the recommendations in terms of businesses within the publicly held land is to have local serving uses, things that could benefit those that are living or working already in the area. But the hope is that it becomes a great place and a special place. And while its intended focus is to support the local community and not be something that's designed to necessarily pull in tourists, inevitably, if a place becomes great, others are going to want to go and experience it. And so the uses are intended for local, the local community. But if it becomes successful with great restaurants and great maker spaces and markets, it could become something that attracts a larger population. And so that's why it's really important to incorporate substantial mountain line transit bus shelters, not just benches. That's why it's important to build out the trail network and really try to support the Missoula MPO in achieving its long-range goals for shifting the mode share from majority single occupant drivers to a more diverse mix of transit, walking, and biking. But parking will still become an issue. There is large enough areas available for a parking garage if that's something that is needed, especially on some of the privately owned land. If they were to do something larger, there is space to accommodate that. But it's a trade-off. Structured parking or below grade parking, it's extremely expensive, and that cost then gets passed on to tenants in the housing. And so to maintain affordability, you have to lower the amount of parking that's provided, or try to accommodate as much of it as you can and on surface lots or on street. And so as the plan grows and develops, additional parking may be needed. And that is a concern and might be a limiting factor to how much eventually gets built across the entire site beyond what the city owns.
Ellie.
Hey, thank you for all the work on this. I am currently sitting in Western Sider's offices, so I'm really excited to see this redevelopment project have so much engagement and I think really reflect what I heard in some of the planning sessions. So it's very exciting. I hear you on the parking things. One thing that I've noticed working in a business that is already located here is there is a lot of pedestrian traffic and use across the California Street Bridge to access the area, which is really cool in that it ties this potential for new neighborhood center to what's happening in the developments across the bridge. And that's just great. And so I think we'll see for both things that are happening over there. Sometimes people start here and then walk over to like games at Ogren Park or things like that. I think we'll see the reverse as well, that there's also parking on the other side of the river and pedestrian and bike traffic that will come through because of that easy accessibility with the pedestrian bridge. So it's really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Andy?
I guess everyone, there's always got to be one in every group, I guess, so I'll be that one. I see this personally as another project. Missoula already has a lot of great spaces. We talk about affordability. And one of the reasons there's affordability becomes difficult is building these great spaces on public dollars. Public dollars has got to be paid by somebody somehow. I see a project again that's being driven by the city. There's city control, a large function of city. And I see it as a downtown initiative again, City Hall initiative to buy more of these good pictures. I mean, it's great planning. It looks beautiful. It's a nice place. Don't get me wrong. That's all there. I just don't think we need and can afford another one. We just put a slide up talking about affordability in that presentation. When we've had 10 years of the last regime running the ship, if you will, we saw prices go from 200,000 as you put up to 415, as I recall. If you looked at a 3% annual escalation, that $200,000 house ought to be $269,000. Under the past decade, we saw that go to 415 or 107% increase instead of a cost of living increase at 34%. Things that we're doing here right now widen that margin. They do not narrow it. We have lots of public spaces. We have public spaces in the golf course that are coming up. They're talking about getting rid of and putting more housing in. So I'm against the thing. I think we should be focusing our money, public money, on other projects and not projects like this. I think it's a desire to impose property where we just said, you know, the city says that they have this chunk and it's a largest city project. And these other participants are around there. We saw a taking of the Sleepy Inn before COVID. We bought Mountain Water. Well, we condemned Mountain Water. What stops us from deciding that we may condemn others who don't want to play nice in the block later? We can condemn property in theory for housing. That could happen. We bought Mountain Water more space because they needed more office space. They were crammed in their offices. The doors still aren't open. You get on there and tug on the door. You can't even get in the building right now. If we need more office space, we just bought it for office space, but then we just talked about moving them somewhere else. So I don't know. You're not going to convince me. I'm not on board with the project. I think it should have been scrapped and never started and focused on other things. I think we can't afford it. At some point, you've got to say no. And I think we've crossed that line.
Did you have a specific question, Andy, or
Nope, just a statement of opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Guess maybe I'll just ask one. You know, the West Broadway Gateway sounds great. You know, and I think it was a really good presentation. I am a little curious about, it just doesn't feel like a gateway in that it's relegated to one side of the street. And I know that Gateway came up as, you know, it came up in your word diagrams. It wants to be a gateway, and I want it to be a gateway. But it seems pretty obvious that it's not just this chunk of land that would need some help down there in order to make it the gateway that we want. And wondering if any consideration was given to looking across the street also.
Right. So the plan does focus, maybe Annette will want to comment on this, but I'll start off. The plan does focus south of West Broadway Street. And one of the main reasons for that was because that's where Sleepy Inn and Missoula Water is. So the city has control over that land. And also the issue of West Broadway Street is itself a Montana Department of Transportation state highway. And so what happens on that street is critical for making that connection between the north and south side. But the city is somewhat limited in what it can do. So while the plan advocates for creating improvements to it to facilitate safer crossings, that has to be done in coordination with MDT. So we did focus on the south side, but in the illustrative plan, we do show what could happen on the north side as well in terms of new buildings coming in. The plan does allude to, when new buildings do come in, perhaps requiring them to be set back, 5 or 10 feet to get a wider sidewalk with street trees, and to, in the design of the street itself would help to unify it together. But for the most part, a lot of the strategies are focusing in on the city-controlled land and what's happening on the south side. But we do talk about on the north side a little bit. But we didn't want to get caught up on West Broadway Street because there's only so much that can be done. See if Annette has anything she'd like to add.
Thank you. So my name is Annette Marshall. So I am the project manager on the city side for this project. I work with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and Rob hit the big points with regard to why the north side of West Broadway was not included in the original study area. We drew the study area explicitly excluding West Broadway Street because that's such a hot button issue. The sense as we were going into the planning process, the sense was that could take all of the attention and no attention would get focused on the land uses outside of the boundary of the street. During the planning process, no matter who we talked to, if we talked to developers, if we talked to bankers, we talked to neighbors, we talked to service providers in that area, we talked to business owners in that area, West Broadway came up every single time. With regard to it's really difficult for pedestrians to cross, it's really difficult for traffic to get in and out of the area. And so we asked Dover Cole to at least give some suggestions on what could be done with West Broadway. And Rob's right that they then, we really appreciate working with them as urban designers because we say, here's the site. And they say, well, you have to look a little bigger than that. And they looked across the street and they looked at, it's pretty broad on what could happen on the north side of West Broadway. We have a pretty high level of confidence that what will happen on the north side of West Broadway will be very consistent with what is being proposed on the south side in this master plan. A lot of that property is in play and the developers are on board with this master planning process. And on top of that, the West Broadway corridor is part of the design excellence review process in the city. And so whatever happens, whatever development occurs on the north side of West Broadway needs to meet the design excellence criteria, which is really in line with what's being proposed in this master plan. So while it's not explicitly included in the master plan, I think there's a pretty high level of confidence that it will be in coordination with what's being proposed in the master plan. So with regard to building massing, pulling the buildings up to the street frontage, those sorts of things.
Thanks, Annette. I was wondering if I may speak a second to the funding that was talked about. I just want to, if that's all right. A lot of what the plan talks about in terms of funding is looking for grants, tax incentive through various federal programs for providing affordable housing, utilizing the opportunity zone, the sites within federal opportunity zone, which opens up another opportunity for federal tax incentives, and direct funding through the Urban Renewal District. So this Urban Renewal District is sunsetting in 10 years. This is Urban Renewal District 2. And TIF funding is what's being proposed to be used for this. That tax increment financing is basically those monies generated within this specific area designated about 20 years ago have to be reused within that specific area for public purposes. That could be or the public good. So that could be for supporting different types of housing. It can be for building parks. So basically, as tax revenues increase within that study area, that difference between what's being collected in, I don't know, what year is that? 10 years, 20 years ago versus the tax value now, that money is put into a pool and to be reinvested within the area. And so this wouldn't be, it's not proposing taking general city funds, but utilizing the tax increment financing and the power of the Urban Renewal District and Missoula Redevelopment Agency, along with grants and utilizing the land value and federal funding. But we do understand the concern for costs. We've been working in Missoula for several years now, and we understand that there's the affordable housing crunch, tax crunch, and a lot of issues. And so trying to find the right balance between getting housing and not increasing costs. And so it's a great comment, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
And sorry, Mike, I might just ask one follow-up question before I get to you. I just want to make sure that, Rob, your discussion about TIF, understand TIF in general, and I think that was in response to Andy's concerns, I believe. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing an underlying answer to my question about why north of Broadway was not included in the, so like north of Broadway and south of Broadway are both in the same urban renewal district. Is that true? And so, TIF funding could have been spent to, really think of it as a gateway to actually master plan to the north of Broadway. It wasn't excluded purposely because of an arbitrary boundary that you just described. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. And TIF funding can still be utilized in that area north of West Broadway. Maybe Annette.
Yeah, I would just weigh in. Yes, they're both in the same urban renewal district, and that area is also in Missoula's one opportunity zone. Whatever occurs, so I mentioned that design excellence is a tool to a mechanism by which to get the sort of design that we would be looking for on the north side of West Broadway. Tax increment financing is as well. Most likely assistance could be provided, especially for demolition of buildings or maybe any sort of improvements within the public right-of-way. Whenever we provide TIF assistance, we request high excellent design from, so we can hold developers who are taking TIF assistance to a higher standard than some other developers perhaps. And so, and I think there's a pretty high likelihood that developers on the north side and the south side would be looking for tax increment financing assistance. And so that's another mechanism by which we have a pretty high level of confidence that we'll get the kind of development on the north side that we are also envisioning on the south side in this master plan.
Thanks, Annette. Micah.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for the presentation. It was very thorough and for all the work going into this project. I'm excited to see this area develop and become something more fully planned than it is currently. I wanted to note that on those slides, the word cloud slides in the presentation, on when people think about this area in the present tense, in the current climate, the word homeless is quite large on there. And then on the following slide, thinking about the future, the word homeless is nowhere to be seen on that slide. And that implies that either the city is, really going to be achieving and expanding the goals that have been set to end homelessness, or that those people are going to be pushed out into another area. And so just verbalizing that and really calling that out feels important. My question is related to that and is about the kind of, the percentage of the housing units that are dedicated to different levels of permanently affordable housing. I'm wondering how that percentage, it looks like it's about a third of the total. How was that, percentage decided? Was that, part of a process going up and down? Is that part of a larger coordinated effort across the city to encourage affordable housing units?
Right. So that really gets at, the best practices for mixed income development. Typically looks at 20 to 30% affordable market rate balance. And so the plan recommends that as a minimum, to push for 50 to 70 units on those sites for affordable housing, and trying to capture the spectrum of affordability from middle income to lower income. And the plan does also recommend setting aside several spaces for formerly homeless to help with that issue. But this has to be a bigger picture. It's one site. It's not going to provide all the housing needs for the city or county, but it could set the stage, and hopefully through the partnerships developed, could be something that could be replicated. But the plan is trying to seek a balance between ensuring that there is a mixed income community here, that it's a place for both affordable units, as well as that when things are built and developed, that there are the market rate components to help subsidize essentially the cost of the more affordable units. And as the if the plan was as it would be implemented, a lot of those details would have to be worked out. Would those specific partnerships be? Would it be partnerships with the community land trust? Would the units be, how many of the units would be home ownership units, such as Cr3 Common style, or would it be rentals, and who would manage those going forward? So a lot of those details will work out, but basically the percentage was for financing purposes and for mixed income best practices.
Thank you. And was it 10, recommended 10 units for formerly houseless people in the plan?
So it recommends up to 10 units, depending on how many units ultimately get built and the operator for it.
Any other questions? Ellie.
So wondering, there was the components of sustainability for the building standards. Are those through the design excellence standards? Is that how sustainability comes into play for new buildings in this project, or is it something else?
It would be something else. So when new public infrastructure is constructed, the plan would recommend that sustainable and green green infrastructure gets built above and beyond what the city might normally do. And Annette, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but tax increment financing could also be tied to certain green infrastructure and sustainability practices, as well as looking at what the city's general zoning is to ensure that solar panels and other green infrastructure, green energy, or just renewable energy things can be constructed in that area. Sometimes they stick up off the roof, and You have to make sure that the zoning won't prohibit that if that's the community's value. If the community's value is to reach the the 100% renewable goal, then there's going to have to make sure that the zoning and building regulations allow that. But it cannot be included directly in the zoning requirements. It would have to be incentivized.
So things like, the zero waste plan for the city, those are the kinds of things that help initiate those types of projects, and, working with community partners and developers to, do LEED type buildings, if that's what you're looking for, can really help with that. And remember, the tools that we have in the toolbox, like TIF and opportunity funds, can help leverage that, private investment to be what you want it to be. And this plan is really the community vision. So a lot more detail goes into project by project to make all of those things come to fruition. But, the plan shows, sort of the big picture forward thinking vision for the area. And remember too, that the downtown master plan overall gives you a sense of what that gateway, into the downtown area looks like. And most of you probably know that West Broadway has been, kind of a very dilapidated area that needs upgrades and investments. It is an important transportation corridor, and it's been a problem for us for probably 15 or 20 years. So, this is just one step to help make those improvements better.
Other questions? Seeing none, maybe we can entertain a motion. And I don't know if anybody has the motion on a slide at all. If not, it is in the agenda. But if it's on a slide, maybe we could bring it up. Thanks, Donna.
I'll make a motion. Be it resolved that the Missoula Planning Board adopt the Envision West Broadway Community Master Plan as an amendment to the Downtown Missoula Master Plan, which is an amendment to the Our Missoula City Growth Policy. And be it further resolved that the Missoula Planning Board recommends that the Missoula City Council adopt the Envision West Broadway Community Master Plan as an amendment to the Downtown Missoula Master Plan, which is an amendment to our Missoula City Growth Policy.
Thank you, Allie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Was that Dave?
Yeah.
Dave seconds. Can we do, let's just do voice vote, or sorry, discussion. Jumping ahead. Any discussion?
I guess I can go. I'll support the motion. I think they've done a great job of planning here, and I think that oftentimes it helps when the city takes the bull by the horns to create a vision and create a plan, not only for the community, give them a way to provide input and craft the future of their communities and their neighborhood, but it also I think helps developers and investors get a sense of what certain locations could become. I think it's going to be critical that they do get buy-in from developers, and they get pretty sophisticated developers in to execute on these types of plans. But I think it's a great start and a good vision, and it was very thoughtful planning.
Thanks, Josh. We'll go to Dave.
Well, I agree with Josh. They a great job of really looking beyond what Missoula looks beyond, and so I certainly support this plan.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else? Micah.
Yeah, I will echo that. I support the plan. I think it's been really well put together, and a lot of time has been invested into it. I really appreciate the public space, the corridor leading down to the river. I think creation of place is something that is really valuable to what makes Missoula special. And so bringing something like that to this neighborhood that's kind of been absent of that for a long time. I really appreciate that.
Ellie.
I appreciate all of the housing and adding in housing in places and affordable housing that is proximal to downtown and part of downtown, so that we can continue to have people who are working in those spaces live nearby where they're employed.
I guess I'll go. I intend to support this. You know, part of me does wish that we had just pushed it across Broadway a little bit. You know, can't win them all. You know, I am thinking of this as a gateway, and you know, if we have the tools in the toolkit to develop the north side of, you know, Broadway in a comprehensive way, it does make me question a little bit why those same tools wouldn't work on the south side. I understand that it's not all maybe in the design excellence or on Broadway, but I think it's a really great master plan. I think that the presentation was fantastic, and I intend to support the motion. Any other comments before we vote? All right, maybe we could just do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed?
Yes.
Donna, did you get that?
I did, thank you. 6 yes, 1 opposed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks, Rob and Linda and Annette for the presentation, and we'll move along to communications and special presentations. I don't believe we have anything tonight. Committee reports. Maybe there was a TPCC meeting today?
In fact, there was. It's like double meeting day for me. So there were a couple of administrative items, an amendment to the long-range transportation plan. There was a couple of projects, in particular the Orange Street Tunnel, that were moved from illustrative to committed because there was some funding identified, so that's exciting. And there was a very long discussion around this self-certification process that has to happen. It's a kind of a statutory thing. And then there was an amendment to the 2022-2026 TIP. So a lot of administration, but some good discussion.
Great, thanks, Tom. And I don't think that we have any other committee reports. Looking around. No. We'll move on to old business, and Bailey's been with us for the last 2.5 hours waiting for this exact moment. Bailey, do you want to take it away?
Sure. And it's all good. I like listening and hearing what goes on too, because sometimes I don't get a chance to hear about a lot of the projects as well. So Josh had asked about this item, the Highway 93 South corridor. It went back in October and kind of like, hey, we had talked about this. What happened with that way back when? And he's been gone for the last 2 meetings. So I have waited until he's been here so that we can like actually talk about it with him as well. So I went back and dug through rewatched a couple planning board meetings. I mean, I didn't watch the whole thing. I scrolled through quite a bit of it, but I did find it was back in March 16th is when we had this discussion. So it's been a while. And at that time, Shane was on the TPCC. I'm writing this down so I can say this correctly. And he was going to bring it up to the representative from MDT at the meeting. We were originally trying to get MDT to come talk, give us, maybe do a presentation for planning board, provide some more data, projects they're working on, things in that corridor area. And just what was going on with it. So Shane had sent me an email back here. He had gotten a response, and basically what they said was, they'd like to interact with us, but they have no information that they want to present to us at this time. So they basically said, we'll love to stay connected, but we really don't want to come talk to you guys right now, which is fine. They did provide, and I can send this out to everybody. They did have a really interesting site that they did link that shows all of their active projects and what goes like just all through the whole state of Montana. So that is kind of an interesting link to see all of the active projects that are going on and scope and what they entail and things like that. But so that kind of brings up, I'm happy to reach out to them again. I can actually even email, this came from Megan, who was the District 1 Public Relations Specialist. I can email her again, says, hey, you know, it's you know, November, hence, you know, would you guys be interested? Is there anything else? You know, would you like to come back and see? The other option is, and this is something that I can work with Josh or help him to, is if and I speak to Josh because I know you're passionate about this, and so I know it's something that you really want to work on. One option is that Josh and another board member or somebody, you know, drafts a letter that could be submitted on behalf of the planning board to MDT or the county commissioners. That would take drafting the letter, bringing it to a planning board meeting, having you guys look at it and say, yes, we would like this to come from the planning board, you know, as a representation of planning board yourself. That is an option, you know, that we could do. I'm happy to look it over, you know, typo wise, you know, content, just kind of that. I can't write it, unfortunately. That's something as staff, like, you know, it's your guys's letter and your feelings. So that's one option. Another option is, Josh, you know, you can write your own letter to MDT and the county commissioners as a public citizen. You know, you can submit that. Again, I'm also happy to look at it as well. But that would come more from you as just a public member of Missoula County versus like from the planning board or speaking on behalf of planning board. And then Shane actually this afternoon in the pre-planning board call mentioned another option is, Josh, you also could attend the TPCC. I had to look. I don't know why I have a problem with that acronym. But you could also attend that as a public citizen as well, and go to that meeting separate from Tung's position as the planning board representative. So those are kind of the three options that I guess really four options that I've really thought of. And so mainly wanted to put that out there. I know we don't have the whole board here, but if it's something, you know, if there's one way you guys are feeling or something that's, you know, interested. I mean, maybe the low hanging fruit is reaching out to MDT again, and I can, you know, see if I can get something else. And it's hard because I can't make them come talk to us, you know, I can ask them, but I can't make them do it. So, but yeah, that's what I've got. And just thought I'd give you guys an update.
Great. I guess from my perspective, Bailey, thank you for laying out those options. I'm happy to attend the TPCC meeting as a member of the public. I would like to encourage the planning board, if you know, people are open to it, to submit a letter elevating this issue to the county commissioners. And I think that we should reach back out to the Montana Department of Transportation as well. I'd like them to at least, if they don't have any color or comments on it, provide just the statistics around severe accidents that cause, you know, injury or death or fatalities on this stretch of road. It's been since March, but I dug into the statistics that are available on their webpage, and, you know, some quick analysis shows that it's pretty dangerous. And I think that, you know, and some of those observations that I laid out back in March, I mean, there's just more people than ever traveling on that roadway. There's no center lane buffer, if you will. You've got two yellow lines between oncoming traffic that's going 75, 80 miles an hour. A significant percentage of that traffic is not compact vehicles. It's construction related, it's ag related, there's horse trailers, there's, you know, construction trailers. It is, I would encourage anybody from Montana Department of Transportation to take their 16-year-old, put them on Rowan Road between 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning or 4 and 7 p.m. in the afternoon and tell them to turn left into Missoula. It is, I don't think treacherous is too strong of a word. So yeah, it is something I'm passionate about, and I would like some answers from them. You know, even if it's just explain to us what the statistics say, right? Here's what the statistics from our data says about how dangerous this road is. And, you know, here are some of the things that, you know, could be options in the future if there's nothing, you know, in the works right now. So I'm more than happy to go to the TPCC as a member of the public, you know, share some of the observations that I summarized back in March. I'm happy to draft a letter and, you know, solicit input, corrections from anybody who wants to participate. And I think that we should reach back out and be the squeaky wheel to the MDOT.
So maybe I can just summarize where I think we're going forward, or at least what Josh has asked is, Bailey, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to MDT and asking them again to potentially come and speak with us. Josh can draft a letter, and we can review it at a future planning board meeting to see if the planning board wants to co-sign it. And if not, then Josh can submit that as a private citizen. And obviously, Josh can attend any TPCC meeting he would like to attend as a private citizen. Those are all open to the public. So does that sound right, Josh? Like, I think what we're asking Bailey to do is reach back out, and then everything else is kind of in your court to.
That's right. You know, Bailey, as a member of the planning board, are there any other options for getting signatures or trying to demonstrate public concern for this issue that would, I don't know, help elevate it?
I mean, you could reach out. I mean, I guess that's the thing too. You could have the letter, it gets kind of weird. Like, I don't know if you need every planning board member to say, yeah, I agree to this letter being, you know, signed as a representation, or if it would just be a majority. You could also, if maybe not everybody feels that way, just get, you know, whoever wants to be on. I mean, you're all citizens of Missoula County. You can all sign as part of this. It just wouldn't be coming from the planning board. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be an like official, this is the stance of the planning board. And that's, I think, kind of the difference of it is not, you know, the stance as a board, and this is, you know, what we feel versus just we all have these concerns and part of that thing. I mean, because then, yeah, you could get anybody to petition and sign sign on and say, yeah, we all have concerns. These are the things. And, you know, that is submitted basically as public comment and I mean, ultimately, I would say I would encourage it to go to MDT and the county commissioners as well, just because the county commissioners do have a lot of working relationship with, you know, some of the projects, and, you know, they're on more committees than I even know about too. And so there may be other ears that can be heard. So I would really encourage it to go to both if that is the route that ends up going. But yeah, I mean, anybody, you know, anybody can start a petition and, you know, and get signatures, and whether or not that needs to be as part of the request from planning board, that gets a little squeakier, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I think I would like it to come from the planning board. I think that's probably incumbent on me to draft a letter that is convincing enough that, you know, people think it's an important enough issue to elevate it with a letter to the county commissioners. Is that action something that falls within something the planning board should and could do?
I think so. I mean, you guys, you know, you're a representation of all different walks of life in Missoula, and you can make that. I mean, it's more of not saying like, how do you say that? It's not saying you're a stance like, oh, we would, you know, deny any project that's going to come down the Highway 93 corridor because of, you know what I mean? That's a different stance. Like, versus just saying, hey, we have concerns and we see these projects coming up. I mean, this is, I guess, how I think of how I would draft a letter is, I sit on this board, I see these projects come up, I hear about all these things, we hear from the public, we hear from, I mean, you just have a wide range of backgrounds to pull from and even say, this isn't our position, but we have these concerns and we want to see them be addressed, or we want to know how can we help get them addressed? What can we do to help push these things forward? And so it's more of not necessarily saying you're taking a stand on a specific, project or something like that, but more of just the bigger issues and what are you, what is happening to address them, I guess.
Great. Yeah, thanks. No,
Yeah. So Josh,
happy to have more projects, especially if they lead to improvements, right? On the highway.
So Josh, part of the meeting today, there was a piece about, I think it was part of the recertification process, self-certification process that will codify some standards around metrics, in particular on fatalities and accidents. And so I'll look that up and I can follow up with you separately to see if that could help you in your cause.
Thank you.
Well, I'll reach back out to MDT. I'm just going to probably reply to Megan and use Shane's email here, and we'll see if we can at least get him to come chat, and that at least starts the ball moving here.
Great. I'll re-download the statistics. Hopefully they're updated. I imagine they should be, and work on drafting that letter. I don't know if I'll have it for the next planning board, but within the next couple, I should.
And just so you guys know, I don't know if we'll have the second meeting in December. There's nothing currently on the agenda for that meeting, if I'm correct on, unless something happened here quickly. So that's the one. It's on the 21st, right before Christmas. So I'm not quite sure if we'll end up with a meeting that one. Just so you guys are aware too.
Bailey, I was also wondering if you can let myself or Josh or both of us know how to bring the letter to the planning board, like how that approval process, review and approval process works, just so that, we can do it properly and Josh doesn't just bring a printed 8.5 by 11 to a planning board meeting and holds it up to his camera or whatever. Like, I don't know if it needs to be printed as a part of the public record or what.
Yeah, it probably will have to be part of the public record, especially, and I definitely would be part of the public record. I'm just wondering, like, does it have to have a majority vote? Does it just what that process is as far as agreeing if it's representing the planning board, right? How many members, and I can look into more of that kind of formality, but it's easy to attach it to the packet. That's not a problem for you guys as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No other old business. New business and referrals. I don't believe we have any. Comments from planning board members. Anybody have any comments? John.
Yeah, Paul, sorry, I meant to talk about this earlier. I didn't really make the connection and I don't want to hold up anybody too long, but I wanted to just remind everybody about the East Missoula thing. About a year ago, this board approved begrudgingly a rezone to the commercial of that exact same parcel, and then that created a bit of a public outcry. And to the community's credit, they had the county overturned the planning board to deny that, and so now the developers came back with the plan for residential, as opposed to, if you recall, it was storage units. That was the big outcry. So as frustrating, I think this is a really tough situation, because what was previously a vacant lot, the options basically are, the community wants, a neighborhood center akin to what was just presented around the West Broadway area. That would be lovely in East Missoula, but they can't get that right now. There's no plans for that. And so the option was basically do nothing, or do some kind of development. So I feel like we came down on the right side this time, hopefully. But I did want to kind of remind everybody about that, because it was one of my first interactions with the planning board, and I found it pretty interesting that it ultimately ended up the way it did.
Thanks, Joe. Any other comments? Go ahead, Bailey.
I was just going to say too, you should all be getting either I think it's the county commissioners, and Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you all should be getting noticed about potential re-upping for planning board here. Hopefully either the county or the city is reaching out to you guys, but I figured while I was like, I need to remind them if you're interested, to make sure to go through the process with either the city or the county to do that. So
thank you. Not seeing any other comments, so we will adjourn the meeting.